Hello, you're listening to the news on Rainier Avenue Radio World. I'm Kendra. Today is Monday, February 15th. The news on Rainier Avenue Radio is live every Monday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., providing you with current, trustworthy, useful news content focused on super service to the local South Seattle audience. We will not tell you what to think, but instead provide the basics for you to discern and decide for yourself. Tonight, we'll talk about a Washington State trooper's death, an ethical crisis in the rehab industry, protests heating up even more in India, and McDowell's Daytona 500 upset. Now, on to local news. Saturday proved to be one of the snowiest Seattle days on record and the first in several years where temperatures failed to break the freezing mark. Per Patch.com, most lowland communities logged another inch or two Sunday before conditions began to transition back toward rain. The National Weather Service predicts a warming trend will arrive as moisture continues, and widespread rain is expected in the lowlands for much of the week ahead. The result will make for at least another day of travel hazards and the added threat of urban flooding as rain falls on top of the snowpack. The extra weight could lead to downed tree limbs and localized power outages. While snow is fading in the lowlands, it will continue in the mountain passes through at least Wednesday, with up to 30 more inches of snow for the Snoqualmie Pass. Washington will focus its vaccination efforts on second doses this week, working to restore the balance between administering initial shots and reaching those who need to complete their full immunization course. According to the State Department of Health, healthcare providers requested 170,000 second doses for the week ahead, nearly twice the 92,325 allotted in federal shipments. As a result, the state will tap shipments meant for first doses to help make up the difference. Patch.com reports that there is a delay in vaccine deliveries until Tuesday, due in part to President's Day and ongoing weather concerns in the state and across the United States. Officials said that their two issues together will make the first dose appointments sparse this week, and some who already have appointments may be asked to reschedule. A Washington State trooper's 2018 death has been reclassified as occurring in the line of duty after an investigation determined her fatal cancer was caused by exposure to toxic chemicals during an illegal auto wrecking investigation. Per Como News, Trooper S. Renee Padgett was 50 years old when she died on September 4, 2018, after a long battle with multiple myeloma, a rare cancer of the white blood cells. Her uniformed colleagues held donor drives in Bellevue, Olympia, and Spokane. Many soldiers at Joint Base Lewis McChord also volunteered to see if they were a match. Padgett also received support from unlikely allies in the Pierce County Jail, where about 40 inmates volunteered to be tested to see if they were a match. Padgett was a trooper for 27 years, working first in Gig Harbor, then in Bellevue, where she was a wrecking yard trooper. They inspected wrecking yards, scrap processors, and hull haulers. Washington State health officials reported 880 new COVID-19 cases and 39 more hospitalizations on Saturday. According to Como News, that brings the state to 327,167 total cases, 18,604 hospitalizations, and 4,675 deaths. As of Wednesday, the state has administered 1,057,844 COVID-19 vaccine doses. The state's current daily average is 26,761. Its goal is 45,000. On Christmas Eve last year, Washington State Auditor Pat McCarthy's office issued a 26 cybersecurity audit report titled Continuing Opportunities to Improve State IT Security. Per the Seattle Times, it warned that state agency computer systems and data make quote-unquote attractive targets for cyber attacks. Per the Seattle Times, the next day on Christmas, unknown actors compromised the auditor's own computer files, exposing a vast trove of private information in what may be the largest ever cyber breach for a Washington state agency. The data included driver's license, social security, bank account numbers, and more for more than 1.4 million unemployment claimants. It also included audit data involving 25 state agencies and 100 local governments, including the city of Seattle, as well as adoption files of 30 children and their families. The Christmas Day breach has created massive problems for the agency and frustration and anger for those whose data was stolen. Many say they learned of the breach only through media accounts and are frustrated by the lack of information from the auditor. All counties in Washington state have now advanced to phase 2 of the Healthy Washington Reopening Plan after a data error was corrected that was keeping one region held back. Per King 5 News on Sunday, the DOH said it discovered Providence St. Mary Medical Center in Walla Walla was reporting COVID-19 hospital admission data incorrectly, which made it so that South Central region did not get the green light to move to phase 2 along with the other regions in the state. The Department of Health said once it was made aware of the data error, state health officials stepped in to help correct it. In phase 2, a maximum of 5 people from outside of a person's household can gather indoors, and indoor dining is available at 25% capacity until 11 p.m., among other changes. Indoor fitness centers can open at 25% capacity. 3 people were injured in an RV fire Sunday morning in Ballard. According to Como News, the Seattle fire crews responded to the fire near Leary Way Northwest and Northwest 43rd Street around 9:30 a.m. on Sunday. An adult female was transported to the hospital in critical condition, and an adult male is in stable condition. Seattle Fire says a third patient was transported by a bystander to the hospital. Fire investigators say the fire was likely caused by candles or a heater too close to the combustibles. Lastly, in local news, police are asking for the public's help in finding a man who attempted to kidnap a woman Saturday night in Bellevue. Per Como News, the suspect tried to force the woman into his minivan at about 6:20 p.m. near North Upway and 108th Avenue Northeast, and he threatened her with a knife. The woman was able to flag down another car, and the suspect fled westbound on State Route 520 towards Seattle. The suspect is described as a black male in his 20s, standing at about 5 feet 9 inches or 5 feet 10 inches, with a slender build. He was wearing a black hat, a black and gray hoodie, and gray jeans. He was driving a 1990s model white Dodge Caravan. Anyone with information or who spots someone or minivan matching the description is urged to call 911. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. When we return with national news, we'll talk about an ethical crisis in the rehab industry and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the national news. For the first time since November, the average new daily coronavirus infections in the U.S. fell under 100,000. Per NPR, the 7-day average of new infections dropped below 100,000 on Friday, continuing at that level through Sunday. Researchers reported 83,321 new infections and 3,361 new deaths Sunday. These figures are well below the average daily infection rate of 200,000 for December and nearly 250,000 in January. Nevertheless, health experts warn that the country has a long way to go before celebrating a turning point in the pandemic. Dr. Russel Wilson, director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said, quote, "It's encouraging to see these trends coming down, but they're coming down from an extraordinarily high place." New, highly infectious coronavirus variants from the UK and South Africa pose a serious risk to any progress in the US. We have recorded more than 27.5 million virus cases and more than 484,000 deaths. The Farmers Co-op Antiques Mall in Central Oregon sells decoy ducks, rusty typewriters, and pins with swastikas. Per NPR, one shopper was looking for toys and instead found a case of swastikas. Their price tag said $36 each. The pins were neatly lined up next to an ashtray with a blackface caricature from the now defunct Coon Chicken Inn, a restaurant chain until 1957. More of the chain's racist merchandise was on sale, like a poster marked down to $18. When pressed about the juxtaposition of swastikas with Black Americana and racist caricatures, store owner Ike Abbas defended the vendor's option to sell whatever they want in a space rented from Abbas for $55 per month. The population of Redmond is 90% white, a demographic rooted in Oregon's legacy of systemic racism. The Oregon Constitution originally forbade Black senators from moving to the state. Other laws prohibited Black people from owning property and making contracts. These exclusion laws were repealed almost a century ago, but more racist language in Oregon's founding document wasn't removed by voters until 2002. A peer-reviewed study published in the February issue of the journal Health Affairs showed that many for-profit rehab programs charged inflated fees and used misleading sales practices to attract patients without evaluating their actual medical needs. Per NPR, the people answering the phones when a team of Yale University Health Studies researchers called weren't medical professionals. They were salespeople using aggressive marketing tactics to get credit card numbers while demanding a lot of cash up front, averaging more than $17,000. Researchers often found the sales pitch at for-profit clinics often focused on things that have nothing to do with medical care. The team found most programs don't provide evidence-based care using medications such as buprenorphine and methadone. These findings, based on data collected in 2019, come as far more Americans are dying from drug overdoses during the pandemic, more than 81,000 last year. Former President Donald Trump's second impeachment trial ended Saturday with his acquittal by senators who were acting as jurors in the proceeding. Oh no. I missed. Per NPR, 7 Republicans joined Democrats in voting to convict Trump, but support from 67 senators, or 2/3 of the chamber, would have been required for a conviction. The Republicans in favor of conviction were Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Mitt Romney of Utah, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, and Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. Among the Republicans in favor of acquittal were Richard Burr of North Carolina, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Mike Braun of Indiana, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Marco Rubio of Florida, and Joni Ernst of Iowa. More than 46,000 Missourians have gotten letters demanding payment of unemployment overpayments. Per NPR, the state said it paid out more than $150 million last year to people who it later determined weren't eligible. The federal COVID-19 relief package passed in December gave states the power to forgive overpaid federal unemployment benefits. Many states, such as Illinois and Colorado, have decided to offer waivers, but not Missouri. The state is offering people zero-interest payment plans, but does not expect people to pay back the money owed. If they refuse, the director of the Missouri Department of Labor has said people could have their wages garnished. Missouri law bars school employees from collecting benefits during summer vacation if there is a quote-unquote reasonable assurance they will be hired in the fall. State lawmakers from both parties have called on Missouri Governor Mike Parson to forgive the overpayments that don't involve fraud, about 97% of cases. Parson said he doesn't plan to override it. From a failed bid for a citizenship question to a presidential memo about unauthorized immigrants that was fast-tracked to the Supreme Court, the Trump administration's moves over the past 4 years follow a playback drawn from the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Per NPR, in 1979, the FAIR launched a campaign to obtain an official count of unauthorized immigrants through the census to radically reshape Congress, the Electoral College, and public policy. Why? The more residents included in a state's population count, the more of a say it has for the next 10 years in how federal laws are made and how the next occupant of the White House is chosen. The Constitution spelled out that all persons, not just citizens or voters, who reside in the states are supposed to be counted in the census. Trump officials tried to subtract unauthorized immigrants from the apportionment count, taking power away from those residents in the communities where they live. One of President Biden's first executive orders officially quashed the Trump memo that called for that extraordinary change. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio World. When we come back with global news, you'll hear about protests heating up even more in India and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio World. This is the global news. Guinea is tracking down people who potentially came in contact with Ebola patients and will distribute vaccines as soon as it can get them, Health Minister Remy Lama said on Monday, as the death toll from the new outbreak rose to 4. The West African country declared a new Ebola epidemic on Sunday after confirming 7 infections, Al Jazeera reports. Lama said, unlike the deadliest known outbreak which tore through West Africa during 2013 and 2016, Guinea now had the means to halt the resurgence of the disease. Neighboring Sierra Leone and Liberia have put their citizens on high alert, AP's Carly Patesh reports. The new outbreak occurred in Nzerekore in southern Guinea, where health officials detected suspicious cases of Ebola with patients presenting symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, and bleeding. 3 months after the Trump administration rejected her, former Nigerian Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala received unanimous backing on Monday to become the first woman and first African Director General of the World Trade Organization. But Okonjo-Iweala will have her work cut out for her at the trade body, even with Trump no longer in the White House, Reuters reports. As Director General, a position that wields limited formal power, she will need to broker international trade talks in the face of persistent U.S.-China conflict, response to pressure to reform trade rules, and counter protectionism heightened by the COVID-19 pandemic. In her acceptance speech at the WTO, she said that getting a trade deal at the next major ministerial meeting would be a quote-unquote top priority, and also urged members to reject vaccine nationalism. Turkish police detained 718 people, including members of the pro-Kurdish political party, in operations against PKK militia, following the killing of 13 Turkish captives in northern Iraq, the Interior Ministry said on Monday. The Turkish government said on Sunday that fighters from the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, had executed police and military personnel who had been mostly seized in 2015 and 2016. The killings took place during a military operation, Reuters reports. The people detained today in 40 provinces across the country included provincial and district chairs from the pro-Kurdish opposition People's Democratic Party, or HDP, Parliament's third largest, the ministry said. The political fallout could raise the stakes in what analysts say are efforts by President Erdogan's party to create a rift between opposition parties that cooperated in municipal elections in 2019 that handed him defeats. Britain's newly established quarantine hotels received their first guests on Monday as the government tries to prevent new coronavirus variants from derailing a fast-moving vaccination drive that has delivered more than 15 million shots in 10 weeks. Passengers arriving in Heathrow Airport were escorted by security guards to buses that took them to the nearby hotels. Some of the travelers said they had tried and failed to make it to Britain before Monday to avoid the quarantine, AP's Jill Lawless reports. Britain has given a first dose of coronavirus vaccine to almost a quarter of its population, but health officials are concerned that vaccines may not work as well on some new strains of the virus, including one first identified in South Africa. Protesters in Myanmar kept up demands on Monday for the release of ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and to end a military rule despite the deployment of armored vehicles and more soldiers on the streets. Suu Kyi, detained on February 1st on the coup against her elected government, had been expected to face a court in connection with charges of illegally importing 6 walkie-talkie radios, but a judge said her remand lasted until Wednesday. The coup and arrest of Nobel Peace Prize winner Suu Kyi and hundreds of others have brought on the biggest round of protests in Myanmar in more than a decade, with hundreds of thousands of people denouncing the military's derailment of a tentative transition to democracy. As well as the demonstration in towns and cities, a civil disobedience movement has brought strikes that are crippling many functions of government, Reuters reports. Lastly, in global news, Scores of people demonstrated in the Indian cities of Bengaluru and Mumbai on Monday after a climate activist was arrested for circulating a document on social media supporting months of massive protests by farmers. Disha Ravi, 22 years old, was arrested in Bengaluru on Saturday. Police said at a news conference on Monday that the document spread misinformation about the farmers' protests on the outskirts of New Delhi and, quote-unquote, tarnished the image of India. Police say Ravi shared the document with Swedish teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg, who tweeted it earlier this month, AP's Kritika Pathi reported. They say the sharing of the document on social media indicated that there was a quote-unquote conspiracy behind violence on January 26, India's Republic Day, when the largely peaceful farmer protests erupted into clashes with police. One protester died and hundreds of police and demonstrators were injured. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. When we come back with sports news, we'll talk about McDowell's Daytona 500 upset and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the sports news. Simone Biles said she would not allow her daughter to be part of the USA Gymnastics setup following the organization's handling of the Larry Nassar sexual abuse scandal. Nassar, a former doctor for the USA Gymnastics, was given an effective life sentence in 2018 for abusing dozens of athletes in his care, including Biles. Biles has previously called for an independent investigation into USA Gymnastics' failure to prevent Nassar abusing young athletes over a number of years. In March last year, she said, quote, "How about you amaze me and do the right thing? Have an independent investigation." On Sunday, the 23-year-old said questions about the Nassar case still remain, the Guardian reports. Quote, "Just who knew what, when? You guys have failed so many athletes," she said. Players taking part in All-Star Weekend in Atlanta will largely have to remain in their hotels when not in the arena, the league told teams on Monday. All players and coaches, whether part of All-Star events or not, will have to continue getting tested daily for COVID-19. The NBA and the Players Association agreed on those rules, the league said in the memo laying out the health and safety protocols that would apply during the break. The league plans to announce starters for the All-Star game on Thursday and the reserves on February 23rd. The first half of the season ends March 4th, and All-Star event participants arrive in Atlanta on March 6th. The game and skills contests are March 7th, and for some teams, games will resume March 10th, or a day earlier than initially planned, AP's Tim Reynolds reports. A 100-1 underdog when the race began Sunday afternoon, Michael McDowell won for the first time in 358 Cup starts when the checkered flag finally flew about 15 minutes after midnight. The race was stopped by rain for almost 6 hours and ended 9 hours after the green flag waved at Daytona International Speedway. NASCAR's season opener was stacked with storylines. Denny Hamlin was trying for a record third consecutive Daytona 500 victory, and the team he started with, Michael Jordan, was debuting with Bubba Wallace, AP's Jenna Fryer reports. And all the way at the back of the field, 1990 Daytona 500 winner Derek Cope made what he said would be his final NASCAR start. At 62, he was the oldest driver in the field, and his upset victory 31 years ago was considered the biggest race in history. UConn is back in a familiar spot at number 1 in the Associated Press Women's College Basketball Poll. For the 9th consecutive season, the Huskies have reached the pinnacle of the women's AP Top 25, receiving 26 first-place votes from a 30-member national media panel Monday. Coach Geno Auriemma's team beat previous number 1 South Carolina in overtime a week ago in a 1-versus-2 matchup. The Gamecocks fell 1 spot to second place in the poll. They received 2 first-place votes, AP's Doug Feinberg reports. UConn now has been number one for at least 1 week every season since 2012 to 2013. Stanford and South Carolina have the next longest active streaks at just 2 years. The Huskies have been atop the poll 246 times since their first appearance there on January 17, 1995. Men's college basketball Blue Bloods earned elite status through multiple championships, sustained traditions of winning, and revolving doors of star players through their programs, John Marshall of the AP reports. But a new group of teams has inched closer to basketball royalty and has remained relatively steady, even as the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc on the sport. Top-ranked Gonzaga, number 5 Villanova, and a handful of other programs may not have the historical resumes to compare to the Blue Bloods, but consistent success over the past decade, in some cases more, puts them in a new category of dominating teams. Gonzaga and Villanova have had little trouble navigating the stops and starts of a pandemic season. The Zags have plowed through one of the nation's toughest schedules, beating Kansas, West Virginia, Iowa, and Virginia, all ranked at the time, while turning their conference games into laughters. Now it's time to go over tonight's show plugs. Seattle Times reporter Bob Condotta shares the latest developments he's heard from the Seahawks locker room on Monday Night Sports Live, Mondays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, with analysis on the latest developments in sports on Rainier Avenue Radio, hosted by Rick Dupree and Seahawks legend Edwin Bailey. Rainier Avenue Radio has some great Black History Month programming going on this week. On Tuesday, Conversations in Black is taking a look at the issues faced in football with the Director of Legends / Player Community Engagement, Mario Bailey, and former Super Bowl champion Seahawks player Walter Thurman III.
And performing this week on Rainier Avenue Radio's dance exhibition and TaiYuArts.com with their presentation of West African music and dance. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We're going to be preempted Wednesday for the second town hall on the violence in the Rainier Beach Safeway parking lot. We'll see you next week.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world.